everyone, my name's Lily and I'm the book blogger behind Utopia State of Mind, and today I'm going to be sharing with you all of my 5-star science fiction and historical fiction reads of 2020. I decided to lump science fiction and historical fiction together because then I would have approximately about 15 titles to talk about today. I thought as well that they made like a really good complementary match, and so I'm just gonna get into it because there are a bunch of books to talk about. I'm going to start with some YA sci-fi. One of the first ones I read and loved in 2020 was Court of Lions. I really loved Mirage. Mirage is a sci-fi about body doubles and rebellion, and so Court of Lions is the sequel to Mirage, and there's just so much sapphic yearning. It was just so great, and it's about coming to terms with your queerness and also with your ideas about the future and who you are as a person, and a bunch of rebellion. I don't want to delve too deep into it because you might not have read Mirage and you might not have read Court of Lions. So there's just a lot of rebellion, and I really love the political movement in this book and how we were able to see the characters from the first book expand into this political kind of betrayal-esque world. If there wasn't enough betrayal before, then Court of Lions kind of gives you one up. I adored Crier's War when I read it. It has automatons, it has ideas and explorations of humanity and enemies to lovers, and the sequel, Ironheart, was just so great. I love Crier and Ayla so much, and the series development in this entire duology has been so beautiful to watch. And I loved how Ironheart really talks about what their future will be like and how we fight for that future, even if it's potentially terrifying and destabilizing, but how we kind of look at our future and then kind of the future of the world and the future of the people around us. And there were some parts in Ironheart that made me tear up in a way that I wasn't expecting, because they made me tear up in not like a, oh, this is so sad or this is so happy way, but in like, this feels so right, and it feels just so satisfying and almost like we've earned this moment. And yeah, it just all came together in such a beautiful way in Ironheart, and I really loved it. I loved War Girls like so much. It is one of my favorite kind of underrated books because it talks about sci-fi and it talks about technology, and it's like cyborg-esque and war and stuff. I've loved the world building of the book so much. Also how it kind of uses sci-fi to delve into history as well. But Rebel Sisters, which is a sequel to War Girls, was just so fabulous because it talks about how to move on after war and how we, like as a person, move on after war and how we as a society move on after war. And there's such a... It's interesting because when I think of Rebel Sisters, I think about it being like how to move on from war. In Rebel Sisters, there also being a somewhat war of information and a war of erasure. So it's interesting because it's kind of like post-war, but also talks about the struggles we're still having after the war ends. One of the sci-fi sequels I really loved in 2020 was Between Burning Worlds. This is a sequel to Sky Without Stars, which is Les Mis in space. I have not read Les Mis. I'm also not one of those people where like, I'm not a super fan of Les Mis, but I really do like Les Mis and Les Mis adaptations. So I really loved this idea of Les Mis in space, and what continues to impress me about this series is how fabulous and immersive the world building is, and how well thought out the things are. How the series looks at the sci-fi world and the political maneuvers in Les Mis and also the characters. Also, at the beginning of Between Burning Worlds, there's like a little section where it talks about every character, what happened in Sky Without Stars. And I would like this to be permanent, like for all series, because I was reading through it before I started Between Burning Worlds, and it was amazing. It helped me so much, and I just feel like all series should do that. So if you agree with me, please like this video. I really loved Wilder Girls, which is Rory Power's first book. To me, now, what I'm known in my heart now, it's like a Rory Power twist. So in Burn Our Bodies Down, there's the same Rory Power twist. I obviously do not want to spoil it for you, but the suspense and the thriller and the mystery tensions are just so fabulous, and Burn Our Bodies Down is kind of like if family secrets came alive and had the power to kind of wrap us up and what we would do to kind of uncover the secrets of our family and the past. So it kind of deals with that while also being super thriller mystery-esque, and it was just so fabulous, and I love the cover so much. The next book is Half-Life. I really loved Lillian J. Clark's debut novel, Immoral Code, so I was very excited for Half-Life because it's not only a sci-fi about clones, it also has one of my favorite main characters because she is such an overachiever. And while she's such an overachiever, and that kind of spurs the movement of the plot, it's also how simultaneously she also just feels like she's not enough. And so because of that, the main character was just so, honestly, so relatable to me. And I loved it so much, and the characters were just really great to watch them evolve. And there's tons of stuff about clones and ethics and science, and like, I don't want to get into it because I want you to discover that for yourself. But that added element of it just made it seem so rich. Another debut I loved in 2020 was Goddess in the Machine. So this as well has one of those fabulous world building nuggets. So I like to call a world building nugget because I love the idea of a world building, like the seed of an idea. So the nugget or the kernel of an idea. World building nugget sounds like an off-brand kind of weird chicken nugget thing. So I think I should definitely think of a new term for it. Maybe a world building seed is a better term for it. But I love that world building seed in Goddess in the Machine, just about this idea about, you know, if you woke up from a cryogenic sleep like thousands and thousands years later, what would it be like to realize your world is fundamentally, completely changed, and how would that kind of affect you? There are so many twists and turns and shocks, and I cannot wait for the sequel. It was also one of those things where I thought I was going to love the main character, and I did. But what ended up happening is one of the side characters, I ended up just so loving so much and being so excited to see in the sequel, and I feel like sometimes it doesn't happen as much as I'm expecting, but it's a nice kind of twist when you end up really loving a side character. I adored Crown Chasers. It is one of my favorite sci-fi books of the year because it just mixes this kind of space exploration, space adventure, and quests and archaeological kind of puzzles and like puzzles in general all together with a main character who is just so, she's arrogant, but she's also vulnerable, and she is quirky and like awry as well, all wrapped into one. And it's also a story about family expectations and political maneuvers, and I need the sequel because the end not only made me tear up, which is really rare that I'll like tear up in the first of a book, but it made me tear up, and I like desperately need the sequel now. And the final YA sci-fi that I really loved and that I actually read in December was Yesterday's History. It has not come out yet, but I love the idea of time travel a lot, and what Yesterday's History tackles with is time traveling as a queer person of color, and specifically queer black man, and how that would be, because I think a lot of people, you know that question where it's like, oh, if you could time travel, like where would you time travel? And then also that question ignores the fact that not everyone could time travel everywhere they wanted to safely, or like time travel at all safely, like period. So it tackles that question, and it also is such a rich book about romance and about friendship and relationships, and also about not letting the past hold us back, and like not letting that hold us back from our future, and also not even the past, you know, like past, present, future, but also our past expectations of ourselves and our past ideas of who we want to be or who we are. Next, we're going to move on to adult science fiction 5-star reads. I only actually have 3 of these. The first is This Is How You Lose the Time War. It was just so unique and fun. The world building is just fabulous, and it was like, it's amazing how much information and emotion you can convey in a letter. It's told in a series of letters, and I've loved kind of books that have unique ways of telling a story, and so this was really unique. The world was really cool with this kind of war in time between 2 different parties. I love the dual perspective, and as I said, it was just such emotionally rich, and I like shipped it basically from before even reading it. The next one has to be Network Effect. I've loved the Murderbot novellas and the Murderbot stories so much. Reading Network Effect, which is the first full-length novel in the Murderbot like world and the Murderbot series, it was just great to be able to really sink into such a really rich and very expansive plot. I love the idea of Murderbot, and I love also Murderbot's narration is always so wry and also so quirky and witty, and it like makes me laugh all the time. I love how I think sci-fi in my mind can be very serious and it can deal with really serious stuff. And space in general, I feel like you have to be kind of serious about, because if you're not, you could make really silly mistakes, like, I don't know, blowing up your spaceship or something like that. But I really love how the Murderbot books always make me laugh. There's just such a lovely, lighthearted hilariousness to it, specifically in the narration, which is just balanced with such great action-packed events. The next one is Architects of Memory. I loved the premise. Not only is it queer, but I love the premise of privilege and also of the salvaging nature of like the corporations and the war, kind of corporate war-esque things, and the world building seed in Architects of Memory was just so great, and I loved sinking into that world. And it was also a book where I was like, oh, I'm gonna like this book, and then I did not realize how much I loved this book until I was like reading the book, and I was just blown away with how much I enjoyed the book. Moving on to the historical fictions, these four are all YA, so I don't have any adult historical fiction. If you have any recommendations of adult historical fiction that you love, please let me know. It's definitely one of my least read kind of genres of adult fiction, even though actually I do read a few of them, I do like it, but I just feel like not all of them are kind of as good as I would expect. So if you have any of your favorite ones, please leave them down below. The first I want to talk about is Silence of the Bones. This is the ARC. I don't have the finished copy yet, but this is just the ARC that I have. It is Korean historical fiction. I love that vibe. I love that setting so much. The mystery in this book was amazing. I loved watching it unfold, and it was one of those things where like I didn't really know who the bad guy was. But it also, the suspense in it just makes you want to keep reading, and I think I read this in like record time because I was so obsessed with knowing who it was and also the setting and the main characters. It just all works in such a beautiful way. The next YA historical fiction I really loved was The Black Kids. It has nuanced conversations about race and class and privilege, and what I really loved was how flawed and how relatable the characters are. Like specifically, I guess, with activism, and I've read a lot more books, specifically YA books about activism, and I think we have a lot of things where a lot of the like activist characters have they have their shit together, right? They have their priorities and stuff, and I think in The Black Kids it was really relatable how it's more of a journey about exploring those things, and it's not one of those books where the main character has it all together and kind of is super aware and everything. It's about delving into the mistakes and the flaws that we have and the areas where we need to do a lot better at. The next book is We Are Not Free by Tracy Chee. I love the Reader trilogy so much. I've been so excited for Tracy Chee's new project, We Are Not Free, and it is such an epic project. Not only is it multiple perspective, I think like at least 10, but it's the writing is just so masterful because it's weaving in this like a main story with all of these side characters, and the characters are in and of itself, they are just fabulous. It was just such emotional to me, and there is some lines where just like got me so deeply because it's about identity and kind of identity being changing, about how people see you and like how society sees you in a way that you're not really in control of, and what that means for you and your daily life, and also kind of what it means for your future. And the last one is Angel of Greenwood. Angel of Greenwood is set in Tulsa, Oklahoma, at a time where it is dubbed as the Black Wall Street of America. And what I loved about this was, it was just so gripping because you see these characters planning for the future, and you know that the future is not going to be kind to them. You also know that they're not going to have the future that they envision, and that gripping suspense as the days kind of count down to what you know is going to happen was gripping, and it was just so emotional to read. But also at the same time, it's just a love story as well, about the difference that one person can make in our life, and the difference that we can make as kind of a ripple effect, sort of pass it forward as well. So it works on both of those different aspects, and that's why I really loved it. That brings me to the end of all my sci-fi historical fiction 5-star reads from 2020. I hope that you have a few that you want to add to your TBR. So please let me know down below if you're going to add any of these to your TBR and which ones, because I love giving book recommendations, as you might know. And I hope you all have a really great day. Bye!